March 17, 1972, 11:42 p.m. Small's Paradise, 135th Street, Harlem. The door swung open, and Nicky Barnes walked in like he owned the place. Chinchilla coat, worth $60,000. Rolex Presidente, worth another $50,000. Diamond pinky ring catching every light in the room. Behind him, 12 bodyguards in matching black suits. The music didn't stop, but the conversation did. Every eye in the club turned to watch Mr. Untouchable make his entrance. Nicky smiled. He loved this, lived for it. He scanned the room until he found what he was looking for. Frank Lucas, sitting alone in a corner booth, nursing a glass of water. No bodyguards, no jewelry, a simple gray suit. Nicky's smile widened. He'd come here tonight to deliver a message. Harlem wasn't big enough for two kings, and by the time he left, Frank Lucas would understand exactly who wore the crown. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand who Nicky Barnes was, and why he thought he could walk into Frank Lucas's territory and make demands. Leroy Nicky Barnes had risen fast. Too fast, some said. He'd started as a junkie in the early 60s, got clean, and somehow talked his way into the drug business. By 1972, he controlled a significant piece of Harlem's heroin trade. He called his organization the Council, 7 black dealers who'd banded together to challenge the old guard. They bought their product from the Italians, same as everyone always had. But Nicky had something the others didn't, a gift for publicity. He loved the cameras, loved the newspapers. He'd eventually end up on the cover of the New York Times magazine, with the headline Mr. Untouchable. That was Nicky Barnes. Flash over substance, noise over strategy, everything Frank Lucas despised. Frank had been watching Nicky's rise with quiet interest. The man was making money, no question. But he was making it wrong, paying Italian taxes, cutting his product until it was barely worth selling, and worst of all, drawing attention. Every newspaper story about Nicky Barnes was an invitation for the feds to take a closer look at Harlem. Every flashy appearance was a photograph in someone's file. Frank understood something Nicky never would. The goal wasn't to be famous. The goal was to be rich. And you couldn't be rich for long if everyone knew your name. But Frank hadn't moved against Nicky, hadn't needed to. Their territories didn't overlap much, and Frank's blue magic was so superior that competition barely mattered. Let the man have his headlines, Frank figured. Headlines don't spend. But something had changed in recent weeks. Nicky's ambition had grown. He'd started talking around Harlem about consolidation, about how the black dealers needed to unite under one banner. His banner, naturally. He'd approached some of Frank's street-level distributors, offering better terms. He'd even reached out to one of Frank's brothers, trying to flip him. That hadn't worked. Family was family, but the message was clear. Nicky Barnes wasn't content with his piece anymore. He wanted Frank's piece too, and tonight apparently, he'd decided to ask for it in person. Nicky crossed the club floor like a parade. His bodyguards fanned out, taking positions around the room. Subtle intimidation. Frank watched it all with eyes that gave away nothing. He didn't stand up, didn't signal his own people, didn't reach for anything. Just sat there with his glass of water, waiting. Nicky slid into the booth, across from him. Up close, the diamonds were even more ridiculous. The cologne was overwhelming. Everything about Nicky Barnes screamed, "Look at me." Frank said nothing, waited, let the silence stretch. Nicky couldn't handle silence. Frank knew that. Men who needed attention always had to fill the quiet. "Frank Lucas?" Nicky said, grinning. "The invisible man himself. You know how hard it is to get a meeting with you?" Frank took a sip of water, set the glass down. "You didn't get a meeting. You walked into my club uninvited." Nicky laughed, too loud. "Your club? I thought this was Harlem. I thought we all shared Harlem." He leaned back, spread his arms across the booth, taking up space. "Dominance display. That's actually what I came to talk about. Sharing." Frank's expression didn't change. I'm listening. Nicky leaned forward. Here's the thing, Frank. You've got a good operation, real good. That blue magic of yours, quality product, I'll give you that. But you're not maximizing your potential. You're staying small when you could be huge. And I think I know why. Frank waited, said nothing. Nicky continued, warming to his pitch. You don't have enough distribution. You've got the product, but you're only moving it through a handful of channels. Family operation, right? That's cute, that's loyal, but it's limited. He tapped the table for emphasis. Now me, I've got distribution. I've got the council, 7 territories, 7 organizations, hundreds of soldiers on the street. You combine your product with my network? He whistled. We'd own this city, every corner, every block. Nobody could touch us. He sat back, satisfied with himself. 50-50 split, equal partners, the 2 kings of Harlem, working together instead of against each other. What do you say? Frank looked at Nicky Barnes for a long moment. The chinchilla coat, the diamonds, the 12 bodyguards positioned around the room, all that flash, all that noise, and underneath it all, a man who bought his product from the Italians, like everyone else. A man who cut his heroin until it was barely 40% pure. A man who'd already peaked and didn't even know it. Let me make sure I understand, Frank said quietly. You want me to give you half my operation, half my product, half my profits, in exchange for your distribution network? Nicky nodded eagerly. Equal partners, kings together. Frank leaned forward slightly. And how much do you pay the Italians for your supply? Nicky's smile flickered. Just for a second. That's just the cost of doing business. Everyone pays, I don't. The words hung in the air. Nicky's smile faded completely. What do you mean you don't? Frank took another sip of water. Calm. Unhurried. I mean I don't pay the Italian tax. Not a dollar. Not a dime. I go direct to the source. Cut out every middleman between here and Southeast Asia. Nicky stared at him. That's impossible. Nobody does that. The Italians control. The Italians control what people let them control. Frank interrupted. I don't let them control anything. My product comes straight from the Golden Triangle. Military transport. No middlemen. No taxes. No Italians. He set down his glass. That's why blue magic is twice as pure as anything you sell. That's why I can charge less and still make more. That's why your council will never catch up to me, no matter how many territories you control. Nicky's face was changing, the confidence draining away, replaced by something else. Calculation, greed, fear, all 3 fighting for control. If that's true, he started. It's true. Then why wouldn't you want to expand? With my network, your supply. Because I don't need your network. Frank's voice was still quiet, still calm, but there was steel underneath now. Your network is 100 men who know your name, 100 potential witnesses, 100 people who could flip if the feds squeeze hard enough. Your network is newspaper stories and magazine covers and a target on your back so big that Helen Keller could see it. He leaned back. My network is family, blood, people who would die before they talked. I don't have 100 soldiers. I have 7 brothers, and those 7 brothers are worth more than your whole council combined. Nicky's jaw tightened. This wasn't going how he'd planned. He'd come here to intimidate, to negotiate from strength. Instead, he was being lectured by a man in a gray suit who didn't even have bodyguards. You're making a mistake, Frank. His voice had changed, harder now, threatening. I came here with respect, offering partnership. But if you don't want to be partners, he let the implication hang. Frank looked at him, really looked, like he was examining something mildly interesting under a microscope. Let me tell you something, Nicky. Something Bumpy Johnson taught me a long time ago. He leaned forward, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. The loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room. Nicky blinked. What's that supposed to? You walked in here with 12 bodyguards, $60,000 coat, $50,000 watch. You wanted everyone to see you, to know you were here, to be impressed. Frank shook his head slowly. You know what that tells me? That tells me you're scared. Deep down, you need all that armor, because without it, you're nothing. You need people to look at you, because if they stop looking, you stop existing. He gestured around the room. I walked in here alone. No bodyguards. No jewelry. You know why? Because I don't need anyone to look at me. I don't need anyone to know my name. The only thing I need is for my money to be right. And my money is always right. Nicky's hands had balled into fists under the table. His bodyguards were watching, sensing the tension, hands moving toward their waistbands. Frank didn't even glance at them. Here's what's going to happen, Frank said. You're going to stand up. You're going to walk out of this club. And you're going to forget you ever had this idea about partnership or consolidation or whatever you want to call it. You're going to stay in your territory, and I'm going to stay in mine. And if I ever hear about you approaching my people again, my distributors, my brothers, anyone connected to my operation, then we're going to have a different kind of conversation, one you won't walk away from. Nicky Barnes sat frozen. 12 bodyguards in the room, 12 guns probably, and this man sitting across from him, alone, with a glass of water, had just threatened him like he was nothing. The smart move was to back down, reassess, come back another day with a better plan. But Nicky's pride was screaming at him. All these people watching, all his men witnessing this. He couldn't just tuck his tail and leave. You think you can threaten me? Nicky's voice rose, loud enough for the room to hear. You know who I am? I'm Nicky Barnes, Mr. Untouchable. You've got a big mouth. Frank's voice didn't rise at all, quiet as ever. And that big mouth is going to get you killed or locked up within 5 years. You want to know why they call you Mr. Untouchable? Because the feds haven't decided you're worth touching yet. The moment they do, and they will, Nicky, because you make it so easy for them, you're done. All those newspaper stories, evidence, all those flashy appearances, witnesses, all those men who know your name, informants waiting to happen. He finished his water, set the glass down with a soft click. I'll still be here when you're gone, still making money, still invisible, and nobody will even remember your name. The room was dead silent. Even the music seemed quieter. Nicky Barnes stared at Frank Lucas, and for the first time, he saw what was behind those calm eyes. Not anger, not fear, not ego, just cold, absolute certainty. The certainty of a man who had already calculated every possible outcome and knew exactly where he stood. Nicky had come here to make a king bow. Instead, he'd been shown that he was never a king at all. Just a man playing dress-up in a chinchilla coat. Nicky stood up. His bodyguards tensed. For a moment, anything seemed possible. Violence hanging in the air like smoke. Then Nicky straightened his coat, adjusted his Rolex, and smiled. But it wasn't the same smile he'd walked in with. This one was brittle, forced. We'll see, Frank. We'll see who's still standing in 5 years. He turned and walked toward the door. His 12 bodyguards fell in behind him, the parade in reverse, smaller somehow, less impressive. At the door, Nicky stopped, turned back, opened his mouth to say something, then thought better of it, and left. Frank sat in the booth for another hour, drinking water, watching the room return to normal. Nobody approached him. Nobody asked what had happened. They'd all seen enough. When he finally stood to leave, the owner of Small's Paradise came over. Old friend of Bumpy's. Frank, he said quietly, that man's got a temper. And a lot of soldiers. You might want to watch your back for a while. Frank put on his coat. Plain gray. No labels. Nicky Barnes isn't going to do anything. He talks loud, but that's all he does. Talk. He headed for the door. The loud ones never do anything. That's how you know they're weak. He was right. Nicky Barnes never made a move against Frank Lucas. Oh, he talked about it. told people he was going to handle the country boy situation, made threats in private that everyone heard about. But he never acted, because deep down, Nicky knew what Frank knew: they weren't playing the same game. Frank was building an empire designed to last. Nicky was building a reputation designed to impress, and reputations don't survive prison sentences. 5 years later, almost to the day, Nicky Barnes was arrested, convicted on drug trafficking charges, sentenced to life in prison without parole. All those newspaper stories, all those magazine covers, all that flash, it all became evidence in his trial. The feds had been building a case for years, and Nicky had given them everything they needed. He'd made it easy, just like Frank said he would. And the ultimate irony, when Nicky got to prison, when he found out his partners in the council had been sleeping with his wife, stealing his money, living large, while he rotted in a cell, he flipped, became an informant, testified against everyone. Mr. Untouchable became Mr. Government Witness. The loudest one in the room became the one who sang the loudest to the feds. Frank's fall came too, eventually. The chinchilla coat, the photograph, Richie Roberts and the feds finally catching up. Nobody stays on top forever, but when Frank went down, he went down quiet, made his deals, did his time, and when he got out, he still had family, still had connections, still had people who respected the way he'd done things. Nicky Barnes, he went into witness protection, changed his name, disappeared. The man who'd needed everyone to look at him ended up as nobody at all, just like Frank had predicted that night at Small's Paradise. The loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room. Nicky Barnes walked into that club with 12 bodyguards and $100,000 in jewelry, thinking he could intimidate a man sitting alone with a glass of water. He walked out knowing the truth. Some men need to be seen, other men just need to win. Frank Lucas always knew the difference. If this story of how Frank Lucas handled Nicky Barnes hit different, smash that subscribe button right now. We're telling the Frank Lucas stories that American Gangster left out. The confrontations, the power moves, the moments that separated the real kings from the pretenders. Drop a like if you understand why the quiet ones are always the most dangerous. And in the comments, who do you think was smarter, the man with 12 bodyguards, or the man who didn't need any? Next week, the story of the chinchilla coat, the one mistake that cost Frank Lucas everything, the night he broke his own rule and became the loudest one in the room. Subscribe, hit the bell, don't miss it.